Hey, what's going on, YouTube? This is just a quick little preface to the video so everybody knows what's going on. There is a 1-year anniversary celebration going on, and I'm going to be speaking in, I think it's like this time slot here. There's going to be a bunch of other streamers involved and, community figures talking about various aspects of development in the game. So, yeah, I just thought I'd record, like my perspective, and you'll be able to see my notes and all the stuff, and the live stream, the Twitch chat, as well as the Squirrel Squad. And I'm going to be trying to read kind of all these chats and pull out the good messages and comments that people have, their ideas. And there's a lot of great information here. And I'm going to try to pass that stuff on to the devs, as well as follow my own sort of little notes here, which I kind of created with the help of JSAT and, again, Pyromancer. So hopefully it goes well. I'm a little nervous. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy. Let's see. Is it this one?
Hello from Canada.
Hey, what's going on, Pyro?
How's it going, Panda?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. I don't think we're live yet.
No, I don't think so.
We can hear them.
Pyro's here.
Whoa! Whoa!
Panda's here.
Hello. Hi.
Hey. Whoop.
Can you hear us?
I
Yeah?
can hear you. It sounds like I'm really loud.
Okay, it worked.
Yeah, I got you from the stream.
I think it's working now.
Yeah, it's coming up the TV.
Yeah, but not anymore.
Can you hear? Can you hear?
Not anymore.
Can we try all three of us? Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Did you hear 3 hellos?
I didn't hear Matt.
We
Matt.
can't hear them.
Yeah,
now,
I heard the 3.
because the sound is going to the TV, man. You muted it.
Okay, very good.
It's only going through.
We can't hear them
We
now.
can't hear shit. No. Oh,
I mean,
I did
stop.
it.
Okay, let's.
This is all brand new technology. So.
Yeah. I mean, we're way better at making games than making streams, to be honest.
Now listen.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that there were gonna be 3 people.
No, I didn't.
We're winging it.
Yeah, we're winging it.
No,
but
that's-
I take no
How
responsibility.
are 369 people still watching this? I don't.
Well, everyone likes disaster, don't they? It's the same effect when you slow down on the highway with some crashes.
Rubbernecking.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's awesome.
People are rubbernecking here.
Oh, it's new tech.
Yeah, Elm 11 has to go eat dinner. Yeah, it's not the. Yeah.
That's just a polite way of saying this sucks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is it on
Yeah, thanks
YouTube?
for watching, anyway.
We can talk, but I don't think we can hear them. Again, Pyromancer, Sneaky Panda?
Test, test. Hello?
No, we can't. They're talking, but we
Hello?
can't. Hello?
Okay, let's do it like this. Maybe
Yeah,
does
weird.
it sound okay for the stream people?
We have
Does
no
it
idea.
sound okay? If everyone talks?
If everyone talks.
Scream and shout.
Again, Pyromancer?
I'm here.
Cool.
Okay, and this weird dying animal.
Chat can hear everything.
Well, this is fine then. I think it sounds fine. People can scream and shout if it starts sounding strange, but otherwise, let's just roll with it.
Yeah.
Send it.
Good.
Okay, we need new name tags.
Ah,
Yes, I'm working on it. There's
Okay.
a dog in the way.
Okay, well, I'll get the dog out of the way.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
so I guess introductions. We've had Daniel earlier on. I don't know if you want to reintroduce for people who may not have been here then. You missed out, but you are.
My name is Daniel Platt. I'm lead level designer on Vermintide 1 and 2.
And over here we
Hi.
have.
I'm Mats Andersson, and I head up the action team. I'm a game designer or some kind of senior game maker person figure. So I'm in charge kind of the team that makes the weapons, the enemies, and all the action bits in the game. So combat and the horrible things.
And I'm Hedge or Leo or somewhere in between. I'm like the community manager for Fat Shark, so I read all of your your enthusiastic forum posts and Reddit discussions. I pass through all the social media stuff and just try and get an idea of what people like and necessarily don't like at the time, and pass that sort of information on, as well as kind of being the voice of a lot of the team here. So yes, that's what I do.
Yes, you do.
Sometimes.
And nag us when we forget things.
Exactly.
And who do we have on the conference call?
Indeed. Who do we have on the other end of Discord?
Hello.
You like to go first, Pyro?
I'll let you go, Panda.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. So my name's Josh. I go by Sneaky Panda in the online communities. It's a gamer tag I chose when I was about 12 years old, and I'm 27 now. I'm a content creator. I make guides and tutorials. You know, I talk about like team play, strategy, attitude, philosophy, that sort of thing. And I've been playing Vermintide since like late 2015. Still going strong.
OG.
I'm again Pyromancer. Mainly what I do is I'm one of the main moderators of the subreddit. So I'm involved in a lot of keeping my finger on the pulse of the subreddit community. I was also on Team Sweden that visited you guys back in January before last, which was a wonderful privilege, and it's good to see some of your faces again. That's about it for me.
Nice to hear your voice again.
It's really nice. Yes.
Your voices.
We missed you.
Pog.
Oh,
So this is kind of going to be a free-form thing. It's all been a bit fluid this week. Lots of the schedule has changed internally, may not have appeared to have changed externally, but yeah, I believe Panda's kind of rallied around some of his crew and come up with some sort of questions or feedback on the sort of level side of things. So I guess handing over to Panda, go for it.
Go for it. Right on the spot. Yeah, we've been loosely kind of talking about some stuff, JSAT, Pyro, and myself, and we sort of brainstormed up just some general ideas of, you know, some elements of map design that make the maps enjoyable for people to play. One of the guys was talking, I think it was Daniel was talking earlier about how in Vermintide 2 there's this goal to sort of make the map more open, to give more options to the players as to how they can progress through the map, and I think that's a really good thing. You know, there should always be like lots of, you know, nuanced small choices for players to make. And I think there are a lot of maps in V1 and V2 that both do that really well. Garden of Moor, for example, the finale, the player is faced with the option to, you know, which chain do you go to first? Do you fight them as a group of 4? Or do you split 2-2? There's all this, you know, strategy element that comes about just from the geometry of the map. Right? Another one that I absolutely adore is Waterfront. Immediately, right from the start, you know, you're presented the option to go to the right warehouse first, or the left warehouse, or do you scour the entirety of the map to get the items on the map before then going into it? You know, which is just really cool. Vermintide, 2 examples. We've got the section where you need to light the candles to get the grimoire to come out, and that's another really good example of a decision that the players have to make in terms of how they go through the map. And one thing that a lot of people really wanted me to mention was there are some instances in Vermintide 2 where there are a lot of options for where you could go, but people don't actually explore those options because of the books, because there's like a logical route that's sort of optimal to pick up the books in terms of time, and one is like the pit that they mentioned. So that was the first one I wanted to talk about, is pathing and sort of like map geometry.
I think that's one of the things that are very cool for us with the books, that they kind of add an exploratory element. But you're absolutely correct with, we've often, like, after a while we kind of noticed that becomes the path to go through the level, like which is kind of sad, or I don't know, it's not sad, but it can be a little bit frustrating when we have all these options. But as soon as we add the books, they kind of just, that just kind of happens. They take that path. But we kind of considered for a while that, okay, maybe it could be random where the books appear, but that would lead to this kind of like, where every session is like looking around for the books for the first time, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's.
I mean, you're basically just prolonging the optimal path, because you know all this kind of places where they might spawn, so you're just going to run through all of those to check where it is.
But I think there's probably a really smart idea somewhere out there to solve this problem. But we've been thinking about it, but haven't quite figured it out.
I mean, we did that.
Could I-
We changed the positions of everything.
Yeah,
like, way back.
yeah. I mean, we could do it in a patch for sure. Like,
Yeah.
just change up the meta a bit. I don't know if you guys have any comments, Sneaky or Pyro.
Yeah, I've got one prepared on that. So if we take Garden of Moor, or the maps from VT1 that have been brought over, I mean, we definitely see the meta shifting and new areas becoming, the default pub strat routes. And yeah, that tension is there. Where if you throw in kind of one-time stuff like challenges, like get to the top of this tower on the pit or something like that, you can encourage people to explore for a few hours, I think, but it doesn't give you kind of like ongoing exploration and off optimal route pathing. So I too came back to the books. But as you say, if people are just having to rummage, it's not really that fun. So I had this idea that what if you did something like with the Grims on Warcamp, Daniel? You were the one that placed those, right? I think I heard that earlier.
Yeah.
So you light 3 candles, and then something dynamic happens. Like you see a burst of blue energy going up to the sky, and that's signaling where the Grim is. So you don't have to search for it in all
So
possible
it's not trial and error.
locations. But it is a different path.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
this time you have to recover the Grim there and fight the Horde there. But next match it might be on the other side of the map. I was
pretty
thinking
nifty.
if you could think of ways to make it dynamic, but without having to search for them, that might solve a lot of the neglected areas. Another one I thought is, what if you gave it to kind of a loot rat? So you come out of the tunnel of some area into the open, and now there's a loot rat running off, and because he's got a kind of Rasknit shield that you can't kill him right away, and he's carrying the Grimoire. So sometimes he runs left, sometimes he runs right. That's the basic idea I came up with, is what if you could randomize the book locations but not turn it into a look under in every corner kind of treasure hunt.
I mean, like, yeah, you could have the path through the level would be different, but not. But you don't have to go exploring to an insane amount. Maybe I see what you mean. Kind of like you'd have if you made it really like simplistically game mechanic wise, it would be you push a button to spawn the Grimoire, but where it spawns, it pops up in different places, and the path through the level would be different. But maybe not wild goose hunt for the whole time.
Yeah, you'd want to give some kind of clue. I'm thinking of the start of Khazad Crow, where you had the upper and the lower path. And part of the reason that was really cool was that you learned to be able to recognize from a distance which way it was. You don't have to go run into the door and say, oops, not this way, and then backtrack. Multiple options are even more fun for the player and rewarding when you can kind of figure out which one to pursue first. I'm ashamed to admit that when the challenges got released for some of the Helmgart maps, I'm like, wow, I haven't been in this part of the map in 5 months, because I play pubs, you do the meta, and it's like, yeah, oh wow, there's a place back here, and that's a shame, because it's material you've got to hand that we could use, with some kind of clever trick to lure us out there.
But I mean, I think it comes down to replayability. To some extent. I mean, we work on that on multiple different levels, both with like the quick play to get to different maps. We work on it with the randomness and different kind of spawns throughout the map, and just having you encourage taking different paths and different kind of topologies to fight in the maps is definitely a part of that that we will look further into.
But I think, like coming up with brand new things is something that can maybe be hard to revisit for the levels we have in the game now. But I think maybe like re-hiding pass or something could be something we look into. But I don't know, adding a new like functionality like some of those you mentioned might be hard to like get into an old level. And I don't know, sometimes we even have people like, some people are really, really obsessed with like doing the levels quickly. And then sometimes you do something which kind of forces them to take a much longer route through. And then you have a pissed off community. They usually like get around to it.
They get mad. I had one more idea actually that would make it less work. What if it's randomized? The Grim is in one of 3 places, but either Sienna or Saltspire can have a voice line that says, I sense it this way. That might be a low mechanical addition way to roll it into maps without having to have additional mechanisms. That was the last one on my list.
Well, I mean, at the core, that is just a kind of an interface question, because what we're talking about now is basically just giving people to play information of, okay, this time around you need to run this part of the map, right? We don't want that thing where you go rummaging throughout the whole map. You don't want to re-explore as much as you just want to kind of have a very specific run through of a different part of the map this time around, right? So if we eliminate that, like that, we value the exploration, because we assume that the players at this point has seen most parts of the map of like 5 months ago, then we can totally do something that's just like, okay, direction wise you're running this route today, or you're running that route, just to kind of provide more variation, so you're not just grinding the same kind of path over and over again. If that's of interest.
But I think it's a worthwhile idea that maybe it doesn't have to be like in the level that explains it. It could be like it could be a dialogue thing, or it could be an interface thing.
Some sound that gets louder the closer you get to it, or something.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that, which would like help, so you don't have to just like check every area for it, like in the first time. But, like,
well, that's what I'm getting from the feedback anyway. I mean, because you guys are talking about that nice feeling when you can kind of see at a distance that, oh, I know which way we're going today, and you have that information readily available, right? It's more about, I am forced kind of or encouraged to take that specific path that I kind of already know, just to get a different experience.
Yeah.
They're pretty cool suggestions.
Yeah.
The one thing that I hope everybody appreciates is map design is a lot more complicated than it seems like at face value, because you can't make everybody happy, right? As Daniel was saying, there's different play styles. Some people focus just on running through the map as quickly as possible to get loot. Some want to run around the map and explore it, and they do enjoy doing that, you know. And when you give too many paths for players to go on, then, you know, you still need to make sure that the main path is obvious to new players, so that it's enjoyable for both the veterans, you know, being replayable, but also for the new players, it's obvious they know where to go, and they do a lot of clever little things to make that true. You know, there's a path here, that there's a door open here, but there's a barricade there, or there's audio cues. You know, these stairs go up, you know, and it's the great map design that makes both groups, you know, happy, which is really difficult to do.
It's definitely a balance there. Also, not only in like in our, like, we have a certain player base which has a breadth to it of how people choose to play, but also you have these kind of people who aren't as vocal, who just kind of run through it as a first-time game, or like they play through every level once or twice maybe, and they feel, oh, I've completed the game now, I've done the skitter gate, or like they don't even like maybe go up to veteran or something. And while you don't want to have like it's not like a Gears of War or Uncharted experience in that sense, but still you want to have a satisfactory time for those people who are just going to play it once. Like, they want a cinematic, cool, fun experience, and that's not what our game is all about, but we certainly want to cater to some of those people, because some people go into a computer game or video game expecting that kind of stuff.
A beginning, a middle, and an end, and a contained experience.
Yeah. So like if we completely focus on like a maze that you can take 8 million different routes through, and I don't know, there's always a balance for us, like which boxes are we going to tick here? Like I'm sure someone would love a randomly generated maze with infinite tomes, I don't know, whatever, or like but you have to have a balance kind of.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also a journey that we see or try to map for the players. Like, a lot of players come into the game and they just want to have that experience, but as you're having that experience, you start to travel down that path of mastery, and then you kind of get stuck and you want to perfect your runs, or you want to be better, and then you learn all the minute little details in the levels and the combat and grim and tome locations and stuff. So I mean, we want to be careful to have that like journey laid out for the players, which means that we need to take all of those parts, the first stepping stones and the kind of high-end play, into account when we make changes as well. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're teaching people to play a game that has a lot of kind of intrinsic knowledge in it, and we want to be really careful how we kind of talk and how we interface all of that in order to have people kind of end up in a mastery role where you can enjoy playing the game over and over and over again and still have a good time, right? So yeah.
You have anything else, Pyro, or can I go into the next topic?
Go for the next one.
Cool. So the next thing, just expanding on the idea of like map geometry and the ways that, you know, you're giving the player the choice to and how they want to progress through the map. I wanted to talk about verticality. And verticality, it's fun to traverse the terrain for the player, but there's a lot of strategical side effects of having verticality too, because when you drop down something, the enemies climb down, and in that little moment where they're climbing, it creates space for you to do, like, you know, get an item off, you heal yourself with a med kit or drink a potion or something like that. So there's a few fantastic examples in Vermintide 1 where we had amazing verticality. The Courier, that was the search for the missing messenger one, where there's that big tower that you climb all the way up and then just dive down, and that's one of my favorite pieces of geometry actually from Vermintide 1. Wizard's Tower had a lot of really cool verticality and changes in height to it pretty much throughout the whole map. The upside down stairs and all of that stuff is just, you know, really cool stuff. In Vermintide 2, I believe you guys call it the plaza on Screaming Bell, there's a statue in the middle of, it's like a courtyard of sorts, and there's a grimoire underneath that. So you have to climb onto a ladder, onto a wagon, and jump into the statue, and then drop down beneath the statue, and that actually spits you out on the low ground by the, what is it, the second tome, I believe? And there's all sorts of little cool jumps you can do. You can jump from the tome down there up, or you can drop down. And I think it'd be a really cool place for like a Fortunes of War type challenge, because you have that verticality, and that allows you to really do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's also sometimes it's fun with the verticality, because sometimes it's counterintuitive for us, because or at least when we were making the first, or Vermintide 1, I was imagining that like being on the low ground or something like that, like being the enemies coming from above was like really tough for the player. But often, like, depends a little bit on the enemy, but like when they were dropping down, the landing animation would like take a little bit of time, so that gives you extra time.
Yep.
So it was like easier being on the lower ground than being on the flat and open. The flat and open is usually when the enemies are the best. But like for me, it's kind of counterintuitive as I don't know, if you're watching a movie or I don't know, something like the low ground, everybody's above you trying to get at you. That's the bad part. But in like a lot of that game mechanic stuff, it's like when you notice after a while, oh, the animation takes longer then, or I don't know.
Yeah.
For a while, I think also when we implemented for the first that there were these upward attack animations, and I think the first iterations of those were faster, so it was really scary, like standing on top of some crates or like I don't know, or on a tent pole or something like that, because they attack you even faster. I think it isn't like that anymore. I'm not. You guys would know better than me,
Yeah.
but I think. I think it's often one of those things where like the obvious thing is maybe not always what it's how the game works. So yeah, but I too enjoy a lot the verticality, and I like the feeling of like climbing up on something and they're trying to get at you, and you have time to like push them off or attack them as they're climbing. And I think that's those were some of my favorite moments in Left 4 Dead, which we kind of based Vermintide off of to begin with. It's like standing on an ambulance or something and trying to shoot at the zombies trying to climb up, and that's something we try to replicate really early. We were very early in Vermintide. We had these AI managed to climb up on stuff or like take time or jump over things or like stuff. The enemy movement in general. We didn't want these kind of like bot-like enemies walking around shooting at you. Like we wanted something really mobile and that could use all the verticality we put in the levels.
You know, I'm all about, empowering the player through, choice, basically. And, having just even tiny little bits of verticality, little ramps and stuff that the enemy can climb up and then you can drop off, just gives you so many little subtle options that, might not be obvious to, somebody who's like brand new. So that's definitely something that, I'd like to see a lot of. The next thing...
One of your videos...
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, one of your videos, Panda, focused on the ring at the end of Elven Ruins. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of the ship.
Athel Yen Louis.
Thank you very much. Where you just kite around the edge, to get off those clutch revives, those clutch heals. Yeah, that's all I was going to say.
I mean,
He can go forever.
Yeah, I mean that whole loop of the as Daniel was on to the minute detail of timings and how long do the enemies stay in the climb animation, and when can you start to stagger them, when do they kind of move, when do they start attack. all of that is kind of part of the of difficulty settings in a way. I mean, it's something that we're kind of looking over, and I think it's really important to have that, just as Sneak was on about. Like you want that interface that you can see, okay, here's an opening for me. If I jump down this, I can create this much time for me, and that enables me to actually do a healing kit, or I can actually do a revive or something.
Yeah, some of my favorite moments are like dodging Chaos Spawn's swing when he's going to grab you, going off of a ledge, and I know like now I have maybe 2.5 seconds to arrest this guy or something
exactly 2.27 seconds before the next attack arrives.
So 1 in a million, but it should work.
Yeah.
something like that. I love that.
We do some tweaking on that stuff. I know like the upwards attack and the downwards attacks, we do some animation tweaking just to ensure that you have enough time around there.
Yeah.
It's something that we're kind of looking at now with the expansion around the corner, just like checking all of those numbers, because there's a bunch of them, not to break something, and also to be able to create something that's a bit more tricky for you.
Can I jump in on verticality, Panda, before you move on?
Go for it.
One thing I've noticed, but it might not be a real thing, is that I felt like in VT1, it was possible to end up losing progress on a map by falling down more often. I'm thinking of Cursed Rune, jumping for the second Grim, which was notoriously painful. That was the one behind the waterfall.
Oh, where you have to drop down?
Yeah, and for a while there was this like movement slow bug in the background that would make it really hard to make that jump, and then people would take turns and they'd be crying. In retrospect, though, I kind of miss it. I don't know why. But Enemy Below, you could kind of fall back down. White Rat was notorious, especially at the end when people were kind of freaking out and trying to run around, and then they'd fall down and be on their own for a while. It seems like I can think of Against the Grain, kind of running up through those barns, you can fall down and kind of be on your own. But was there a decision to kind of do less of those traps or those pitfalls in VT2?
I think at least when it comes to the tomes and the Grims, we were like, in Vermintide 1, we imagined it would, like the Grims would be for like super hardcore diehards. And in the end, what happened was that it was kind of just like 90% or 95% of players went for Grims and Tomes. And they had to have all of them, which meant it was just like, it was not this like one-time thing or not this like super hardcore thing. It was like something that everybody wanted to do.
You were supposed to do it.
Yeah, you were supposed to do it, which we didn't really intend to. At least, I don't know if you were.
We wanted it to be a discussion. I mean, it's one of those optional difficulty triggers that you can have. Like in a perfect world, the team comes together and we infuse communication into the team because they have to have a sincere discussion. Can we manage to grab a tome?
But like I remember, maybe I'm not as invested in my loot because I'm playing. I've helped make the game, but I remember like having discussions with people online, like, no, we don't have to do this Grim. We're not good enough to survive the end event with this Grim. We're already down to like 2 HP. Yeah. If we have the Grim, but like people refuse, like they have to have the Grim or bust.
Well, that's just expectations for you. I mean, you don't want to. If people have the expectation of getting to the end with all the books and everything, and then they fail at that, they fail, and they don't like
If you
that.
provide a loot incentive to do challenges, they're going to take those challenges.
But I mean, that's player culture as well. I mean, we don't control the community. We can encourage certain things, but we just have to kind of go with the flow on that. And if that's the culture that comes out.
But to come back to the verticality thing, I think we've avoided having extremely complicated jumping puzzles to some extent. I mean, they can be hard, but they won't punish you by like sending you back 5 minutes on the level or something. I don't know. They may appear again. I don't know. We sometimes we feel like it, but in general, I feel like we've those kind of softer punishments. Often it can be like if you just died by falling down there, it would have been horrible, but everybody else could move on. But now it's like I don't know. Now it's like a long wait for the guy to come back up, and it's like so we have avoided those a little bit, I'd say. But it's also like just these things that are minor irritations to people, and they're a lot easier to avoid the next time around when you make a new game, because you can have a whole approach to it.
But I think that also comes down to that thing where we want to cater to the new guys playing recruit, and then veteran, and then upwards towards the challenges. And I think like it's easy for us to fall into a thing where we make something that's a bit too simple for the legend guys that are already invested, and they don't mind. I think it's a fun thing. If I fall down and have to kind of run back,
Yeah.
that's an interesting kind of punishment, or you, I hope you get what I mean after.
But
So, I mean,
but something that's interesting about jumping puzzles is that jumping puzzles don't scale to player skill.
no.
In like Vermintide generally, like Vermintide is all about like dodging, not taking damage, you know, like staggering and team play. Jumping puzzles are completely outside of it. You can have a complete noob, but they're just really good at timing his jumps.
Oh yeah, but it's
to
a
get the
separate
good
skill.
one.
I mean, I'm crap at jumping puzzles.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's nice to have a skill that you can actually be proud of.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, but it's like when you're playing at that high level and you have to get the grips, that thing can be a big gap in a lot of people's player.
Yeah, no,
Not that it's just, sometimes it's a little bit luck, but like you said, like you would have these extreme pros trying to get at the Grim on Kazakh, no, not Kazakh Pro, the outside. What's the outside?
Well, but
Kazakh
it would have been
Pro?
nice though. It's like a hard
First
carry.
Grim.
We have to bring the jumping puzzle
First
guy,
Grim.
right?
Yeah.
That's really good at jumping puzzles. He's crap at the gameplay. He can't survive anything. Yeah, like Leo. Like
Yeah.
he excels at jumping.
I'm pretty good at the jumping puzzles.
Isn't that like the opposite of a carry? Like he's got one thing, you're carrying him through the rest of the level, and then
No,
Because
I'll
he's the
carry the
only one who
books.
can do it.
literally carry the books.
But it's interesting. I mean, the way we talked about it, like variations in the gameplay. I mean, we could. One solution would have been like changing puzzles and stuff based on difficulties, but I mean that all comes with like overhead in work capacity and how much click we're able to produce per month, in a way. But I mean, it's something that we have discussed specifically, the jumping puzzles. How difficult should they be? How frustrating, or is it okay for it to be? Because we have a range of different people at the office that tries to play the game, and we have the full spectrum of personalities and kind of mastery on there. So we have to kind of cater to people who are new to the game and have a nice experience, the mid-level players that are kind of semi-casual in a way, and then kind of the pro mastery really kind of want to succeed in everything. And we end up somewhere.
Did you just wink?
At you.
Yeah,
I thought you didn't notice.
Oh, no, I see it
You
all.
know, I want to make you feel comfortable.
Very kind.
I think you're up again, Panda.
All right. So the next thing, this is another one of those kind of delicate balances that's really hard to strike. There are these maps in both games that sort of force the player to move, and they're intended to make you kind of fight under pressure. But you need to give an incentive to actually make the player go forward, because a lot of times what will happen is the intended thing, the way that it's intended to play, is that you have to rush and fight under pressure, but sometimes it's better to actually stay where you are and then kill the enemies and then progress after. So there's some clever things that you guys have done to actually force the player to play under pressure. A Vermintide 2 example is Hunger in the Dark. There is a cart with barrels in it that's actually a light source, and you're surrounded in darkness, and you're forced to escort this cart through these dark areas where the enemies can surround you, and that incentivizes the player to, no joke, push through the map and to fight under pressure. It's not really an option to just sit there and stay and slay, as JSAT calls it, and then move afterward, which is kind of just more like almost like a gated checkpoint system. So some Vermintide 1 examples where this was done really well. The White Rat, the finale of White Rat, you climb onto the 3rd floor, and you can see the 4 chains. So now immediately the players are forced with the decision: do we, speed share this, share the speed potion, split 2-2, and like break these 2, and rush so that we can defeat all the chains before the ogre spawns, or we're not good enough to do that strategy. We're going to stay as all 4 players, and we're going to go to 1 chain, and then we're going to hold after each chain because we know that horde spawn and stuff like that. So there's kind of incentives to do both. The enemy below, the barrel event, and the Drakenfell statue event. Those are both events where, every second that there's not enemies on you, you need to be moving those statues, or you need to be moving those barrels. So it kind of puts you under pressure to really, keep moving. And I do really enjoy those.
I want to shout out Kazakh Crow tunnel blow up demolition That was another great one that would tear up teams that couldn't decide which way to go first, and would, you could have the barrel blow up in your face before you got to the tunnel.
And sometimes those maps are really hard, and this kind of leads into my last point. It's something that I've sort of noticed. It might just be my interpretation or whatever, but it seems like sort of the maps that are harder to play are sort of like not being made as much. So like I've heard sometimes with the developers, they kind of evaluate the success of a map by how much it's played. And I think that kind of falls a little short, because there's some fantastic maps from Vermintide 1 that are not going to be played very often just because they're difficult. And I'm sure it's not the greatest thing, the greatest feeling when you put all this time into making a giant map like Skittergate and a number of people in quick play just jump off the cliff at the beginning to avoid it when they roll it. But I don't think that makes it a bad map. It's still something that needs to be there. From Vermintide 1, you have Waylaid. Waylaid was awesome. An ogre bursts through the floor of the Red Moon Inn. It's so cool. Trial of the Foolhardy had this like extremely intricate, unlocking progress, and then by the time you actually got into it, the events just threw you in event after event after event in darkness and all this craziness. The boat sequence on the River Reich, where I think it was like a sideways elevator or something like that, I heard. But you're like trapped on this boat as these enemy boats like board you. Those are all crazy hard maps, and they're not going to be played all that often. But I think that doesn't mean that those maps aren't awesome.
I think sometimes that was a very long question with several parts to it. But I think when it comes to like difficulty and how popular our levels are, it's kind of like hard because I don't know. We only have so much time in a day that we can do stuff, and for us, I don't know. You can compare it to maybe a dessert or like a main course, and I don't know. The main courses are what you're going to be, or what people are going to be using most of the time, and that's what are going to be most popular. And then sometimes you have a dessert or a weird entree or something like that people are going to enjoy some of the time. But if, I don't know, we should of course not do desserts, but if we're going to we only have time to do one thing tonight, we should probably do a main course, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's like an effort to reward ratio kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like how we only have so much time, and most people play these levels, which are like this. Of course, I mean, you're completely correct that some of those levels are really great, and we want to keep doing a few of those. I think in not too long, we'll show one of those levels, which is kind of like that, which is kind of different. But also, like, it's not only the difficulty from us that matters. Sometimes we make levels that are very fun on a one-off thing, but maybe the replayability isn't quite up there. Like, for example, the River Reich boat level was maybe not the most, like, the ending event was always, or the boat event was always pretty similar, and it was kind of so it's one of those things where it's a balance for us where we want to have, like, our bread and butter, or our main course is this like level that's always different every time, and to some extent, at least the components, the enemies in there, and how it plays, and you have some options and choice, and maybe sometimes we just completely go away from that and add something else. But I definitely really, to go back to the first part of the question where you have these kind of under pressure event situations, I'm a big fan of those as well, and it's always a challenge for us to have the enemies, because like stay and slay is often the tactic for a lot of people. Like, they get scared, they back off, they pick a good corner, and then it's interesting when, like, that's what people do 95% of the time when you're out in a normal level.
Yeah, that's
but then
the default strategy.
The default strategy. Yeah, but because you're in an event, that will force you to go into we have to push through this. We have to do what we're not supposed to do, or whatever. Like, the logical thing.
But it's like, it's down to readability and pretty much like gameplay literacy in a way. I mean, starting off, most people do the default strategy, the optimal strategy, because that's a known factor. But when you start to kind of read the situations and see that, okay, we need to push here, or we need to stop here, we need to utilize a ledge here, or whatever, that's quite far into the gameplay when you actually learn the game in a way. So I mean, there was always that balance, and there's always that discussion. I mean, we had that term we called death wall when it came to our kind of terror events. When should we be using death walls in these events? Well, sometimes you kind of need that. That's basically a timer that runs out and gonna punish the player for not progressing fast enough. We're just gonna spawn enough stuff so you're pretty much gonna die unless you're really good at the game. So that's really usable if you really want people to be able to kind of progress or force them to progress. But it has to come with the interface. It has to come with the communication towards the player, so the player knows that there's kind of a death wall coming as well. So I mean, if we have new players that don't really appreciate or don't really see that, we're basically tricking them, teaching them throughout the game that if you just back off into a corner, you're going to be fine. And then you come to the end event like 30 minutes into the level, and then we just kill you because you're doing what we taught you. And that's always tricky. And
I mean,
that's
a classic example for that is like the Modern Warfare games, or like
Yeah.
where you just have like the early mid Call of Duties,
Yeah.
where you have these enormous hordes of enemies that keep coming, and
Yeah.
it's like, if you don't move like 3 meters forward into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
trigger where
yeah.
they stop coming, they're
Yeah.
going to keep coming, and
Yeah.
just empty magazine after magazine
Yeah.
after magazine. And it's
also
just-
with a reload box right next
Yeah,
to
exactly.
you. So you're
So,
like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to step forward. Oh, okay, now
and then,
everyone.
yeah, exactly. So you have to be really clear about those situations where,
Yeah.
I don't know, we try to do a lot with like voiceover,
Yeah.
like we have to do this now, or
Yeah,
something.
or run at the top of the screen. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's
or
always
like
tricky.
music that's like in a sets you in a mode,
Yeah.
which is like often those things can be like, because you've seen them a few times before,
Yeah.
you've learned this now. This music means move forward.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, we usually do these kinds of things on the end events, and I think we've kind of established in Vermintide 2 that there might be some quirk in there. I mean, where you kind of completed your thing, and now it's time to run for the hills. I think like using the end bubble for that as well. Just run to the exit. It doesn't matter anymore. You just need to get the hell out of here.
Mhm.
That's a good kind of principle, but I mean, it's all down to communicating and kind of setting up the players to actually perform what they're supposed to be doing, or actually, in a perfect world, having a choice of what to do, right? And that can be tricky, specifically with new players and specifically with the new game. I think we're much further along now with the community and how we play the game, because there's usually someone kind of like helping guys out, or there's rarely a completely new team that comes into the game.
Yeah, or
That's why
they've seen tutorial videos.
Yeah,
by-
yeah, they're just gonna jump up and down ledges until.
I've got a riff on that. So you were talking about the interface mats and how you don't want to train people to hold out in corners and then suddenly spring an event where they have to run for their lives. I play mostly pubs, and often you can just run through most of the map without much communication. You know, if you see someone on their own, you head their way. You don't need to do much coordination. But then sometimes you hit an event where if you are uncoordinated, or an area where if you're uncoordinated, you just wipe horribly. Like Athol Yenlui was kind of notorious. You know, you will come out into the open after this kind of canyon. You can go right for a tome or left for a grim. A horde comes and people scatter. So it's not really that it's a difficulty spike, but it's like a coordination spike.
Yeah.
And I think there's a continuum. There's some things like Righteous Stand where it's pretty natural to just group up and you're fine. Khazid Crow, you kind of want to call out which tunnel do we take first, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the hardest version of that was Summoner's Peak on Kata and Whale Watch, because both of those you had to desperately defend an objective while not dying, and that turned out to be about the hardest thing you could ask of your average Vermintide player.
Yeah.
And so people came up with very convoluted coordination strategies. You watch this one, I'll watch this one, and don't screw it up. So I see a bit of a spectrum there of coordination. And one thing I thought of along the same lines of kind of training people's expectations. If you take Khazid Crow again as an example, you come up to a statue of Valaya, I think it is, and there's a left route and a right route. And uncoordinated, people can just kind of split, but often people say, let's go right first, left first, just so that you're not totally running around like headless chickens.
Yeah.
I think maybe if you can seed a couple of moments where it really helps the team, but without the stakes being huge, like a team wipe, if you don't manage it, if you can give them little moments where it helps to be coordinated, maybe that trains them to expect to say a couple words to each other at the finale as well. I'm not saying you don't already do that, but that might be along similar lines to kind of remind people that it helps to coordinate before they get to the team wipe version.
I think one of those things that's important, like in our game, coordination is so important, but I think it wouldn't be important at all if you didn't have all of these like little things that I'm just going to do on my own, and I'm just going to go off and get this healing kit because I can see it, and they don't. Oh, I don't have to call out that I'm going to go get it because I'm going to be back with them in a second, and then you get taken by a gutter runner or something.
Yeah.
So it's all these things that if we didn't have the motivation to split up, then you wouldn't need the coordination. So it's like it's this game about sticking together and stuff. But if we, as level designers and game designers, don't make the players want to split up, then it's not interesting at all. So like you have, I can do this a little bit faster. This objective. If we split up,
the loot ran is the example. That's specifically there to challenge the co-op. Basically, do you run together or do you run on your own with first time you see?
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it pays off to just do it on your own and go get something. So it's like it's this like intermittent. Not intermittent reward, but intermittent punishment. Like sometimes it's the right decision, sometimes it's the wrong.
We do keep the co-op aspect of the game as kind of a core pillar throughout the gameplay. So for every kind of decision we do, we have that co-op challenge, and it's kind of undefined because it's hard to define because you have it on multiple levels, right? You have it on a kind of player-to-player level. Someone's grabbed by a gutter runner. I need to go help them. That's a kind of micro loop in and of itself where I need to go do something for a specific other player. That helps kind of foster co-op. But what we're talking about here is strategy and coordination co-op. It's a much softer thing. So it's way harder because you don't have that acute, immediate, like there's a sign or an interface component, a logo on the screen that says everyone needs to go here and do this. There's a decision to be made: go left or go right, right?
Yeah.
And something we struggle with because that comes down to facilitating communication, and that's a two-part thing. We need to inform players, and that has a very different level based on how well versed they are in the gameplay about that there is a decision to be made. I think, like you said, a lot of pubs, they just kind of flow through that and we always go right, so they don't even think that there is something to discuss or there is something to coordinate about until they kind of fail at it because someone went left, right?
Yeah.
So it's both about us being better at communicating. Here's a thing that you guys need to make up your minds about. Do we go left or right? Do we back up or do we rush together, right? And I mean, players who play together a lot, they solve this by themselves because you have your voice chats and stuff. But specifically when it comes to pickup groups, we can definitely do more, but it's really tricky at the same time because you want that thing where you've learned the game well enough so everyone in the team can identify that this is something we need to kind of coordinate about and then make a decision together, right?
Okay.
If we were to put up signs all over the map, oh, here you should probably talk about if you're going to go left or right or bunch. There's a horde. Pause the game.
Discussion point.
Discussion point. You have 30 seconds to decide whether or not you should turn up in the corner or rush.
Now vote.
And then the elf only has one choice, which is just run off by myself, right?
To be clear, what I meant by teaching the lesson was give them the left-right path with no sign.
Yeah.
And teach them the lesson the hard way, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think to come back to your earlier point about Summoner's Peak and Well Watch, I think I'm not sure it was all like those are kind of concepts we chose not to revisit for Vermintide 2 to defend the mechanic, and I'm sure there's different reasons for it. I'm sure you have ideas too, but I think one of them was maybe that it required too much communication. Like you can't play it in a pub almost. It's very, or at least in my opinion, it's very hard to play with a pub. But also there's issues with maybe like how the AI attack things, and maybe like it's hard to keep track of enemies that aren't after you. Like if they're after something else, it's even harder. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons, but I think we have to have a certain base level where a level can be played without constant voice comms. Like you have to be able to play with a pub, even on like, I don't know, veteran or something or champion. Like if it's too difficult to play in a normal setting for most players, it will be.
Well, I mean, we took all of those. I mean, all the shorter levels from Vermintide 1 was more kind of challenge-based and less experience-based in a way. Like, you don't get that journey through a exploratory thing where you go into dungeons and stuff, but more of a, here's a problem, you need to figure this out, it's going to take 10 minutes. And that's difficult to approach in some cases. It's not that we don't kind of like it. It's just when we did Vermintide 2, we went like, okay, let's save those for later and figure out how we can do that. And I think some of the part, like if you want to Fortunes of War, that's way more challenge based. And I think we're at the time with the community now where we can produce stuff like that as well, because people are kind of more ready for it, I suppose.
Yes, I think so. And I think putting it behind an unlockable, that sort of challenge thing, would show that generally, if you're going to be playing that, you're going to already have been established enough to find the guides online, and you'll have more of an understanding of the nuances of the game by proxy of having unlocked it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a large part of that comes down to like expectations between players, specifically in pickup groups. I mean, if I have an expectation that I'm gonna go on an adventure, I'm gonna be a dwarf, and I'm like larping through this thing, and it's super fun, and then I end up in Wellwatch, where someone is screaming at me for not protecting the well enough on the specific position that we needed to stand on.
It was not well watched.
No,
Well, that was
exactly,
quite
and
unique.
that's like.
That was quite a unique level in that it was one of the only levels, if not the only level, with a fail state, right?
Yeah.
Where you could lose without dying.
Yeah.
I think what we did, we made the fail state into like the entire level died.
Yeah.
When both the wells died, the gas spread everywhere. So actually, there was no new fail state. The player just died like normally. But
It wasn't the brightest.
Sorry, we had long meetings about this, and then this was kind of a cop out. But there might be more defend levels in Vermintide 2 if we figure out how to do them. But I wouldn't wait for it.
Another clarification: I wasn't pointing to those as directions to possibly go in, because I think you guys are right that the community, name your favorite maps. Those two just didn't hit the top very often. That would be a fairly minority opinion, just in my assessment. But it was the extreme end of insisting on coordination.
Yeah.
Panda, you got another one?
I mean, that's pretty much most of the sort of big picture stuff that I boiled it down to. The only other stuff is pretty much just kind of questions from the community, stuff that, people have prodded me about in our, sort of inner colonies and stuff like that.
I've got one kind of medium-sized topic. Daniel, and then I'll surrender my platform. You mentioned kind of the bread and butter of Vermintide being the random level, not handcrafted. That I totally agree with that assessment. I feel like I sign up when I log in, I hit quick play, and I'm looking for chaos with pals. Bunch of strangers, friends I haven't met yet. We're gonna do a map, and I don't know whether I'm going to hit this drop down and be swarmed by monks or not, and that's really what I'm there for. It's always unpredictable. In that light, I've been a little confused by how some of the events and finales seem too scripted, in my opinion. So that the level's fun, and then I hit the end of Right to Stand, for example, and I just typed into chat YOLO. At this point, normally I'm all about the consent, but I just can't handle holding out in the corner anymore for predictable spawns. So how do you guys deal with that tension between keeping things chaotic and unpredictable? And I think I heard someone mention that in some cases, for example, they wanted it to be seeded or predictable just so that the achievement is more reasonable. You can kind of learn it and get the achievement. But how do you resolve that tension between a scripted event and a random map?
I think it's one of those things that we've thought a lot about, and often the problem for us has been that we need to be able to quantify how difficult this thing is going to be. More difficult than the parts before it, at least in our intention. It can have higher amounts of enemies or something like that, or it'll at least be more intense. But then we also have to make sure we don't overdo it. So, and if there's random elements to it, that could make it much worse. But I think there has been a discussion at work here between us level designers and with game design that maybe we want to move away from the more scripted version of this. But I think that the original intent was that, okay, we can go really ham on this if we know exactly what we're going to give people. But if we let the game handle it, then you have these, and you make it even harder than usual, then you're going to have these, I don't know, some of these situations where you have a patrol and a, I don't know, a
Yeah.
rat ogre and a.
I mean, at base value, we want to avoid the thing where you play through a map in 20 minutes and then just to get to the end, and then the end is the huge challenge, and then you fail there, and then you have to replay 20 minutes to get to the thing that's actually difficult. So we try to push the challenge to the mid events. Now, another thing that goes into this is also like how much time we have to spend on handcraft these. So one thing that we are kind of looking at is just going through and difficulty scale a lot of the events. And just make sure that as we expand on the number of enemies we have and the number of different functions that we have to throw at the people, at the players, we can expand on that randomness, but it's quite a lot of work. As Daniel said, it's important not to overdo it. So we have this like duality in it where we on one hand create stuff like Fortunes of War, where it's a really specific seeded thing where we want you to be able to learn stuff because we're throwing so many specific things, like 8 or 10 gutter runners. I mean, we don't want that to just be random. We want you to be able to prepare for that. And on the other hand, we have the normal events where we just wanted to kind of follow the curve and the difficulty of the level in general, while not specifically, because there's no point from our end to make that super seeded, as in same all the time. But it's more of a, if we make it random, it might just spike away difficulty-wise, and then we have a bad experience. So we're trying to find the time to see if we can do something about that, because it basically just comes down to someone has to sit and click through all the level events across all the difficulties and then test it a couple of bunch of times to make sure that it actually scales nicely.
But we have heard your feedback online with POW, or maybe it was even here in person when you guys were here as well. That like a lot of if there's too much consistency in the terror event, it just becomes kind of dull, especially if it isn't at that high, almost impossible level of what's the level called? The plaza level. What's it called?
Fortunes of War.
Fortunes of War. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I think I don't know if that's already come out with the difficulty scalings on terror events.
Well, I mean, we have done some prep work on it. We're looking them through. It's in the backlog currently, so I can't promise anything.
No.
It's just something that we're very, very aware of in a way, and been talking a lot about. Because I mean, we can fine tune that, but it's also like, okay, how much do we want to do Beastmen and stuff and other things, and it's gonna take some time. And there are not an endless supply of devs at this studio. As such, but I mean,
sacrifice 1,000 of them every day.
Yeah.
It's hard challenge.
No new levels for half year. We need to click through all the terror events. But I mean, I just want to point out that we look at these things as quite separate things. One is that set challenge that really kind of requires a set team, and you can build your loadouts, and you need to go. Oh no, now it's got to run the time. After that, you're gonna have 3 chaos spawns, and that's a very fun and engaging, challenging experience. But it's very much a different experience compared to the like end of level or running through a normal level in the game, where you want that variation, possibly without the insane difficulty spike, right?
But for us, the challenge at the end of the level is we want to up the intensity, and we want to make sure people have like a satisfactory ending, especially the first times they play it.
Yeah.
But I completely get where you're coming from when you say that like the ending event is the least interesting part for you when you're playing like a legend run or like challenging yourself.
I think it kind of ties into the stuff we talked about earlier, just having a variation of strategies that you can employ. Because what I'm hearing is basically, if there is an optimal strategy on every end event that you always do, and it's also a cultural thing, specifically with pickup groups, then it becomes routine, right? It's both too little of a challenge, and it's something that's just kind of expected going through the motions, and that's not super fun.
I guess one of the funner things with Vermintide compared to many other games, other loot-based games, is that the routine there's very seldomly a routine you can play every time.
Yeah.
You're not sure what you're gonna get in the level, as you say, when you're playing a normal level. But I think maybe sometimes our end events don't fully check that box.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a discussion that we're having here, and we'll see what we come up with. Or like what we can.
Basically, we're just going to replace every spawn with plague monks.
Yes. Thanks for exploring that topic. I have one suggestion.
Yeah.
I play a lot of Twitch recently, and mainly because I love getting bosses in weird places. You know, you add a boss instantly, you've got a fun time happening, no matter what the scripted event was going to be. Um, and it shows that a lot of players at Legend, 4 bosses on a level, that's cool, that's fun.
Yeah.
Which points to the fact that it's just really hard to do a one-size-fits-all thing. So I'm happy to hear about difficulty scaling. One thing I imagined could be an option, if in the pile of mutators, if mutators become kind of more accessible, something like savagery, which is just normally you guys are doing a good job of promoting chaos while putting caps on how crazy things can get, right? So the bosses spawn, the threat level goes up, and you won't get another horde if you've already killed one while the boss is still up. A mutator could just take the gloves off.
Yeah.
You know, if that's what you want chaos, we'll give you chaos, but you have to choose it.
Yeah.
So every boss spawn still has a chance for a boss, something like what Onslaught's done. A lot of people would be down for that, and I think that would eliminate the need to, handcraft.
Yeah.
Let people buy in and for the madness.
For a deed or something like that, it's totally true. I mean, we're looking at stuff like that, but the game and the AI, both on a like spawning level and on an individual like attack cooldowns and stuff, if we unshackle that, you're dead. It's horrible to play in a way. I've spent the entire day doing that because we're kind of fiddling around with stuff for upcoming things, and when you get to the point where like you're afraid of 4 marauders, it becomes troubling. But it's definitely something that we're kind of starting to explore, specifically the higher difficulties. I mean, Fortune's War was one of those things where we went like, okay, I think we have a good kind of onboarding thing. We have a nice thing for the players that come in and just want to have an experience, and we have a solid community, and we want to provide something that's actually a challenge. So we are looking a lot of like getting to grips with the difficulty in the game, fine-tuning that, both on stuff like Anna brought up with ledge jumping. How many microseconds are you actually gaining from the enemy? The same with like staggers and blocks and attacks and things, just looking at how that timing kind of works, because we have a quite wide space to work with once we start to push things, and the same goes for the conflict director.
There's a lot of values there that could probably be tweaked for, as you say, when you want that really screwed up situation.
So the main discussion we're having is like, okay, what do we want to provide as kind of a core staple of the game? What kind of difficulties do we want to have? And then the other part of that is what can we provide both for like the modding community and as deeds and stuff at specific one-offs, because it's about communicating with the player again. Like, okay, what kind of game do you want to play? I want to play Crazy Vermintide where it's super, super, super challenging. If we can provide that, I mean, that's quite fun to build as well, to be honest.
I mean, there have been considerations you've got to make for like people have bought the game, say, with the minimum requirements as well on the store page, and then you start unlocking, taking the gloves off the AI director, you're going to just start melting those people's computers, and you're not able to necessarily support the hardware that they've bought into the game with. So we have to take that into account as well, I think, sometimes. I'm like looking at Onslaught, for example, you can ramp up the number of enemies, but we can't necessarily support that in a vanilla way, perhaps, because people, like I say, have bought into the game with their system, and suddenly it's no longer supported, or they don't have...
It'll be like in old strategy games where you could only start certain level sizes with enough RAM memory. You can only start the very largest levels if you had 32 megs of RAM. You can only start Onslaught if you have a i5 or something.
We used to play like Age of Empires like that. We just waited 1 hour until you attacked each other, and then you had like 2 FPS for 15 minutes while everyone was like
moving at chess speed.
Yeah, it's beautiful to watch. But it comes down to the handshake between like, we sell a product to the players, we want to have, this is the expected product, you have this experience, and then there's extra on top of that, which can go beyond like those agreements. But you find a lot of that in the modding scene as well, I think.
Yeah, on the topic
I just
of...
wanted to clarify.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
One clarification. So we were talking about...
you go ahead, sorry.
We were talking about using scripted events as a way to make sure that they didn't get out of hand and be too difficult and be kind of out of touch with what people expect out of a run. So that's mainly what I was addressing. You can go the Fortunes of War route and crank up the challenge and the number of enemies and everything. That's definitely one conversation. But the other one I was just saying is not hand scripted. So not necessarily, throw 50 more enemies than normal, but just let them be unspecified. So make it a Skaven wave or a Chaos wave or possible boss spawn.
We have all of that in the conflict director, and we have a lot of leashes in there as well, where we clamp out the spawning if it gets too intense. We clamp down on how many Chaos Warriors and how many Storm Vermin you get to spawn at.
Yeah, exactly.
So just provide that. So we could completely unleash that. That's part of what I've been testing the last couple of weeks as well, just working with the system a bit. And you can make completely horrible die within 3 meters of spawn experiences with that. I'm not saying that on top of that, we also have systems that just control the second-to-second combat. I mean, base value, all enemies ask each player before hitting them, is it okay if I stab you a bit now? And then the players usually say, no, I've had quite enough of stabbing lately. So when you start removing all of those shackles, you can create a quite super high intensity experience.
But to go back to the end events, I think often it's hard to realize why you did things in retrospect. But I think at the time, we had a lot of worry that people wouldn't be able to complete the levels at all on Recruit. And therefore, having them be a scripted sequence of what was going to happen was a good way to make sure that we didn't have things go out of hand. We knew what people were going to get then, so if we could just make sure they had they weren't completely low on HP, most people get through this, because people have to be able to finish the game, or they're going to be, I mean, that's sadly the reality of it. If people can't finish the game, then they're going to be pretty upset, even on Recruit or something. But I think that's one of those things where for the retail release of the game, we had to make sure we tick those boxes. We're okay, it's predictable enough for us that we can test it, and it's always the same, and it's not going to have this difficulty spike at the end, which we don't know about or something.
Yeah, no death walls.
No death walls, exactly. But I think it's one of those things that we probably should revisit a little. I'm not sure we will have time, but I think it would be nice to look at some of the end events again and maybe twist those with difficulty, or make those more interchangeable, or at the very least look into doing that for our future content.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the expansion is one of the areas that we kind of zoomed in on from a game design point of view as well. Just looking at the difficulty and how good and solid of a control we have over that, and what we can tune and tweak on it. So you can definitely expect some changes on that, and we're trying to experiment a bit, both left, right, and center, and just trying to get to grips with everything on a quite detailed level, and it's actually quite fun. More.
Very good. Back to you, Panda.
Well, that's pretty much me done. I've just got more or less one little thing to chime in on, which was the you mentioned, making sure to communicate to the players, what's intended or what the difficulty is. And I think a nice little small thing we could do for that, especially going forward with all of these, sort of build your own challenge things, would be to make sure that that information is presented in, say, the lobby browser or something like that, or the pools are separated so that people don't find themselves, above their head, so to speak, and they're signing up, to go into it, which I understand is going to make, separating those pools is probably going to make you'll have less players in those pools, but at the same time, you don't want to toss somebody into something that they're not prepared for. So.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, I think a large part of that is down to just community culture in a way. I mean, you're gonna have a finite amount of words you use to describe the different games you want to play in a way, and that has to come naturally from the community. If it's modded stuff, we can help by having stuff like deeds or the weekly event, because we're gonna set certain expectations of those. Okay, deeds are probably harder, and the weekly events are just kind of crazy stuff, and push those things to help people kind of communicate clearly and efficiently and quickly about hi, I want to play something, I want to click that thing because that's kind of my style this evening.
Yeah.
And it's also something that's having too many different ways to play the game can also be scary depending on the community size you have.
Yeah.
So like if you have this really weird off or like this super limited way of playing the game, which is going to be into a few people, and then maybe you're in an area like Oceania or something where there's not a big player base, you can also split the community lot. It's fine if you're like Call of Duty or whatever, because then you have infinite players pretty much. But it's like if you had, I mean, you want the customization for people, but you also don't want to alienate some people that are going to play the game, because it's a hard balance.
We're always going to have that, like the vanilla experience, where we want to have people be comfortable. We want to point towards like, hey, welcome to the game. Just click this button, you'll win the game. You'll play a nice experience. We have to have that. You know,
I'm not sure everyone agrees that.
No.
Like,
yeah, I totally get that, but it's important for me. I have kids; they're gonna grow up and play this game soon. I want them to have like a nice way in to that.
They're gonna die so hard; they're not gonna finish a single level.
Yeah, well, they need to learn that life is not fair.
Okay, so it's not.
But I mean, when it comes to that part of the community that wants specific content, I mean, the higher the skill level is, and we've come to realize that we have quite a high skill level in Vermintide, the more specific you're gonna get. But it also becomes way more of a community-driven thing, because I think guys know what you want to play to an extent. We can provide and help you with those tools, rather than us narrating super specifically, like, okay, now we find a specific thing for this guy in Oceania because he's been wanting to play only Skaven slaves, but all of them have pogo sticks or whatever. Like, I don't think that's the way for us to go, but we totally want to support
I'm
that.
up for pogo stick in Skaven.
Yeah, it's just like, I just made an AI coder cry upstairs because now we promised pogo stick.
Rather than separating them completely, you could also just do it as like a sort of opt-in kind of system. That's sort of how we do it over in the Discord communities. We have like role assignments, and people go in and they opt in to receive notifications for a particular category. So they're separated by difficulty and region and stuff like that. So for people who are looking to play modded craziness Twitch mode with people who are specifically in North America, they can do that. But you can still see the pool of all the players available to you, so it's sort of an opt-in system. So if you want to alienate yourself and be very specific about what you want to play with and who you want to play with, then that's on you, but it's not forced onto the player.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, we've been very fortunate with the community that we do have, because the way I perceive it is it's quite a nice community that actually includes a lot of people, and is quite forthcoming in trying to help people find the way they want to play the game. And I mean, we don't shy away from that. I mean, we're very aware of the fact that we can only build a game that's like an experience, and then people will find their own way through that, and we need to be conscious about that and try to be följsam, following in English, but like just kind of try to attune to that in a way.
And it's also fun with like who showed up to play the game, like how you guys have affected the community around you, or like, and how it's affected also the game. It's like a mirror unto itself, where like you made the game, and then the people that play the game want certain things out of it, or like don't like things, or mod the game to do things, and then we sometimes like, oh, we get inspired and we take in those things, or
totally.
It's been fun, because I'm sure if another bunch of people had picked up this game at like Vermintide 1 at release, it would have been a very different game. I think maybe different things would have been the priority, like like the
pogo sticks.
Yeah, or I mean, like, I don't know how we did an expanded what do you call it? Expanded like perks and skill tree for Vermintide 2.
Yeah.
Maybe that wouldn't have been a priority. Maybe it would have been just more like FPS levels.
Yeah,
I don't know, like how the first one. It evolved along with you guys, which is fun, I think.
Shared authorship with the community. But I mean, we talked a lot about that when setting this up as well. That, I mean, when we hit Market and when people come along, we're gonna have to see how they play it. We can only assume and build for the variations and different strategies and stuff, and then see what happens. And it's been quite an amazing ride based off of that.
I'm really grateful to be a part of this community, and it's really awesome that you guys are reaching out to the community for this kind of feedback. It's, not a lot of developers quite do that on that, personal level, so.
We love it.
Yes. I mean,
yeah, ditto.
We mainly learn.
Congrats on the anniversary. I was echoing Panda, and also saying just congrats on the anniversary. You know.
Oh yeah.
No, thanks for sticking with us for the 12 months of Vermintide 2, and at least was it 3 and a bit years, 4 and a bit years.
Yeah, it's all a blur.
The Vermintide journey, I think. So,
It's already been a year.
yeah, it has. But I guess is it 6:03 now? I think we're probably going to have to wrap up a bit. People can go and see their kids.
We have a giveaway as well.
We have a
Oh,
giveaway.
Yeah,
What is it?
Poggers.
No, they don't want to give away, right?
Yeah, no.
No, you guys don't have time for that, do you?
What are we giving away?
A mouse and a desk pad.
A mouse and a whole desk.
Myonix.
What is a desk pad?
We
It's
are
like a mouse
sponsored by Myonix.
We're sponsored by Myonix.
Myonix.
We are sponsored by Myonix.
Really
Sort of.
awesome.
But what is a desk pad?
It's a mouse mat.
Yeah.
Is it a big
Well,
mouse
probably
pad?
like one of
Yeah.
these.
It's like
Like
very-
this bit? You guys can see my other hand.
Like
But
super big.
use
like
your
this.
use
Doesn't work
your
either.
right hand like this.
What, like this?
Yes, it's like this big.
Wait,
Yeah.
we can go. Okay.
Is it this big? No.
Let's check it out.
It's like 7 times Leo's face. In
There it is. This big.
That is a big
Oh,
ass
what am I doing?
mouse desk pad.
I mean, that's actually a really tiny keyboard and a child's hand. So,
Yeah. It's all rigged.
yeah.
What's the
No.
fish there for?
The fish.
It's a shark theme.
Ah.
Got
Did
it.
you photo cache this?
Yeah.
Ah, well, there we go. There's a comment.
Wonderful.
So,
Is this a graffiti artist? Why does he have all these like gold spray cans and like? Is this
Because
is this
he's really
does he sell
creative.
fish?
Oh
What
my
is
God.
this? Is this a fish thief graffiti artist who's modeling this?
It's
Child fish.
so
thief
many
graffiti
questions with a tiny keyboard.
artist. Yeah, tiny hands.
So, are the giveaway? Is it open?
no.
Entries? They're not even open.
Yeah.
So we're not even doing a giveaway yet.
I mean, should we start now?
I think we should start. Yeah, I mean, if you want to win,
Do you
What?
want to win?
yeah, do you want to win
Do
a
you wanna
mouse
win?
and mouse desk? What are you calling it? A desk mat?
pad.
A desk
I
pad?
think it's called a desk
It's what you keep your desk on it. That's what.
Yeah.
It's like a tablecloth, but for your desk.
pad. Yeah, basically.
Okay,
Um,
A mouse cloth. A mouse
What are the
cloth.
criteria for entry today, Tim?
Tablecloth.
What hash do we want? A nice
What hash? What hash?
Yeah.
I haven't done that in years.
Hashtag hashtag anniversary. I reckon.
But we had that hashtag 1YA because we had anniversary yesterday.
Ah.
We have to innovate.
Can we think of a pun with anniversary?
Oh my god, we're never gonna
Anniversary rat.
Oh,
No,
so creative.
Yeah.
I say hashtag 1YA.
Well, that's
1YA.
just.
Sounds like a Korean pop
I mean,
group.
it's naff,
Yeah.
but
The Korean
We'll go with
pop
it.
group 1YA.
so yeah, if you want to win that, type that.
Yeah. Type
One
one.
Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you do
That's
it.
very nice.
Yeah.
Ah.
Thank you. I'm quick on my feet. Yeah.
Nurgle version.
Now it turns out this is a slur in some Slavic language.
Uh-oh.
we're banned from Twitch.
Yeah.
It's gonna end horribly.
How long are we waiting for this?
It's at least
Slow
20.
pokes.
I think it's 23 minutes. Is
We
the
have to
law.
sit in here for
Yeah.
23 minutes.
Yeah,
and
but
sweat.
usually in silence. Just.
Just look into the camera, Daniel.
Yeah, it says there. Look into the camera.
I mean, I wouldn't even know that. That's written in
Titta i
Swedish.
kamera.
Well, you should be able to read Swedish by now.
He's,
Yeah,
he's leaving the EU. He doesn't need anything.
it's true.
Ja.
Rich.
Ja då.
Ja.
Vad ska vi göra nu då?
Ja.
Don't put
This,
it
you're
in.
doing a very good Norrland
Yes.
discussion. You're just saying
That's the only thing. You
Ja.
just sternly look at each other's faces and then just nod
and
slowly.
drink.
And point out obvious things. It's important.
I know when I do that.
Got tea there.
I don't actually.
Slut på
But,
vatten.
that's not how you do it. You just nod. For those of you who don't know, like I'm from up north, way up north. I was there this weekend with my kids, and the way you say yes up north in Swedish is just a sharp in.
How do you spell it?
P-S-U-C-H.
No, it's spelled 1YA.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice. So I guess, yeah, we got like 5 more seconds or something before Tim rolls the dice. Bam!
Rolling. Grungy coffee.
Grungy Coffee
Grungy coffee
is the winner of a mouse and desk pad.
Yeah.
Did I get that right? A desk
with the
pad
shark theme on it.
Yeah, is the fish included?
Yeah, with a shark theme.
with a shark theme. Congratulations! That will be coming to you soon.
Does that guy live in Seattle?
That's a good
Grunge coffee. I mean, these things are very, very Seattle-y.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Do you live in Seattle, Grungy coffee?
Yeah. He has a Pokemon profile picture.
Does that mean anything?
I
That's unrelated.
yeah, no.
Oh.
You know,
He lives in Denmark. We're very disappointed. My theories were very off, but I like Denmark a lot. Tillykke med din diskpad.
Oh, stop. No.
Anyway, congratulations. I think Tim will dig out your address from you and then come and deliver it to your house personally at the weekend, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
But
It will take
otherwise,
2 weeks to arrive,
2 weeks.
roughly.
Oh, it takes you a long time.
Yeah, you know, I have to walk there. Yeah.
It's uphill both ways, right? In the snow.
Yeah, it's tough.
But I think we're going to wrap it up for today, unless you've got anything else secret lined up.
What did I know of?
No. We're going to wrap it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. CET, which is probably about 1 p.m.
It's 5 p.m. 5 a.m. Wait, did I write it wrong?
Ah.
Well, it's 5 a.m. Pacific time.
I see. 5 a.m.
Yeah, and what you took us off the screen.
No, you're still on.
Am I still on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just ready to shut it down.
Okay.
Brutal. Thank you very much for joining us.
Come on, you Spurs.
Hey, thank you so much, guys.
We'll be back tomorrow.
Take care,
it
chat.
easy.
Bye.
Hey guys, I had someone at the door. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao for now. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Great work.
Awesome.
Oh, it's warming.